In September 2015, 7 friends entered Keyhole Canyon in Zion National Park. It was meant to be a short trip, less than half a mile, just a couple of hours inside. They had helmets, ropes, and excitement. To them, it felt safe. The weather in the valley looked calm, blue sky, red cliffs glowing in the sun. Nothing seemed dangerous, but they could not see the storm above the plateau. The canyon walls hid the sky. High above, a dark cloud was already forming. Rangers had issued warnings. They knew the danger of flash floods. But once the group stepped into Keyhole, nothing could stop what was coming. After that moment, nobody saw them alive again. The next day, a search operation began. Rescuers entered the canyon. What they found was terrifying. Bodies in the water, gear stuck in the rocks. The flood had taken all 7. It became the worst tragedy in Zion National Park's history. To understand what happened in Keyhole Canyon on September 14, 2015, you first need to understand the setting. Zion National Park in southern Utah is a landscape like no other. Towering red and orange sandstone cliffs stretch thousands of feet high. The Virgin River winds through the canyon floor, carving one of the most dramatic valleys in the American West. Every year, over 3 million people visit Zion to hike its trails, climb its cliffs, and gaze at its breathtaking panoramas. But Zion holds another secret: hidden worlds, carved not by footsteps, but by water. These are the slot canyons, narrow passages in the sandstone, some no wider than your shoulders, others dark as caves. Entering one feels like stepping into another planet. The sport that takes people into these hidden passages is called canyoneering. It's a mix of hiking, swimming, climbing, and rappelling. Unlike traditional hiking, you can't simply walk out if something goes wrong. Once inside a slot canyon, steep vertical walls trap you. The only way out is forward, through icy pools, sheer drops, and shadowed corridors. Canyoneering requires rope skills, technical gear, and a strong understanding of weather and water. Zion National Park includes many slot canyons. Keyhole Canyon is one of the shortest, barely half a mile long, but don't let its length fool you. Inside Keyhole are icy pools, tight squeezes, and short but technical rappels. Many beginners choose it because it's short and dramatic, offering a taste of real canyoneering in just a couple of hours. Rangers even call it a classic introduction, and it had a reputation for being relatively safe. From 2002 to 2014, records show only 2 fatalities in Keyhole Canyon. For most visitors, it was a thrilling adventure that ended with wet clothes, tired smiles, and unforgettable memories. That reputation may have added to the group's confidence on that Monday morning. No one expected that the very canyon known for its short, playful challenge would within hours become the site of the worst canyoneering tragedy in U.S. history. What awaited inside was not the laughter and photographs they imagined, but a silent trap, one that had been waiting for centuries for just the right storm. On the morning of September 14, 2015, 6 members of the Valencia hiking crew enrolled in an introductory course called the Keyhole Subway Ground School at the Zion Adventure Company. Later that day, they were joined by a 7th companion, forming the group of 7 that would attempt Keyhole Canyon together. They weren't beginners to the outdoors. They had hiked mountains, camped in the wilderness, and pushed their limits before. By most accounts, they were strong, experienced hikers. But there's an important difference. They were hikers, not canyoneers. Hiking builds endurance, confidence, and teamwork. But canyoneering requires something different: technical training, rope handling, the ability to read a canyon, and above all, knowledge of flash flood danger. The course was not long, but it was designed to give first-timers the essentials: Some practiced rappelling down short drops. Others learned how to spot for teammates or how to keep ropes from tangling in tight spaces. It was a crash course in a sport where even small mistakes can carry big consequences. But while they were learning ropes and knots, a more urgent warning was already spreading across Zion. The National Weather Service had issued a flash flood warning for that day. Forecasts predicted thunderstorms in the afternoon, with heavy rainfall possible over the park. Rangers took the alert seriously. Flash floods in slot canyons are among the deadliest dangers in Zion. Signs were posted, rangers cautioned visitors, and many canyoneers canceled or delayed their trips. Still, flood danger can feel distant, even abstract. At the visitor center, the sky above Springdale was partly clear. At the mouth of Keyhole Canyon, the ground was dry. To someone standing there with gear in hand, the idea of a sudden flood might have seemed almost impossible. And besides, Keyhole was short, barely half a mile. They'd be out before the storm rolled in. At least that's what they thought. The group decided to press on. They had helmets, they had ropes, they had enthusiasm, and they had a plan. Keyhole would be their first real adventure in Zion, a taste of the sport they were eager to embrace. By 11:45 a.m. on Monday, September 14, 2015, the group of 7 set out toward Keyhole Canyon. The sun was still bright over the valley floor, glinting off the red sandstone cliffs. But higher on the plateaus, storm clouds were already beginning to gather. What the group couldn't see was the giant, dark thunderhead swelling above the high country to the northeast. The sheer walls and towering cliffs of Zion's main canyon hid the sky beyond. From the valley floor, the horizon looked calm, almost serene. From the outside, Keyhole doesn't look particularly dangerous. Its entrance is just a crack in the sandstone, a dark slit leading into shadow. Tourists passing by on the road would hardly notice it, but once you step inside, the world changes. The first rappel dropped them into a narrow chamber where sunlight barely touched the walls. Cool air brushed over their wetsuits, and their voices echoed off the slick rock. One by one, they descended, the rope tightening in gloved hands, helmets knocking lightly against the stone. For a moment, it must have felt like triumph. Their training was working, and they were moving as a team. By early afternoon, thunderheads began piling over the high plateaus to the northeast. The National Weather Service issued more warnings. Storms would sweep through the region, dumping bursts of heavy rain. At the visitor center, rangers watched the radar with growing concern. Flash flood advisories were updated. Radios buzzed with warnings. Rangers had already advised hikers that slot canyons were unsafe. Many groups canceled trips altogether, but once inside Keyhole Canyon, there is no easy way out. The group continued to make progress. They lowered themselves down another rappel, waded through more icy water, and squeezed through narrow slots where packs had to be pushed ahead. Their wetsuits, though uncomfortable, helped keep them moving. Spirits were still up. This was what they had come for. At 3 p.m. on September 14, 2015, the storm unleashed its fury. Sheets of rain pounded the Kolob Plateau, and in minutes the smooth sandstone transformed into a network of rivers. There was nothing to slow the water down. Every crease, every drainage, every dry gully became a funnel, all leading downward into the slot canyons. And Keyhole Canyon was waiting. Inside Keyhole, there was nowhere to run. The canyon narrows to just a few feet wide in places, with vertical walls stretching high overhead. Once the water entered, it filled every chamber, every pool, every passage. The first surge likely hit with stunning force. Cold, debris-filled water slammed into the canyon, rising rapidly. The group was scattered across different chambers, and the flood would have struck them in stages. One moment they were waiting or preparing to rappel. The next they were fighting to breathe. Some tried to climb higher onto small ledges, pressing against the canyon walls, desperately seeking air. Others may have been swept into pools where churning water made swimming impossible. Helmets and wetsuits offered no protection against thousands of gallons of water surging through the slot. The force of a flash flood is staggering. Just 6 inches of fast-moving water can knock a person off their feet. In Keyhole that day, the water wasn't measured in inches, but in feet, rushing with the speed of a river released from a dam. Logs, rocks, and mud churned within it, turning the flood into a violent blender. No one inside Keyhole Canyon survived. By 3:15 p.m., the group was gone, swept under, pinned against walls, trapped in pools that became deadly whirlpools. Their adventure had turned into catastrophe in less than 15 minutes. In those narrow slots, time must have slowed. Each second was a fight for air, a battle against a force no human could overcome. The very beauty that had drawn them there, the sculpted walls, the twisting chambers, became their prison. As the storm swept across Zion in the afternoon, other parts of the park felt its power too. The Virgin River swelled, trails turned slick, and thunder rolled off the canyon walls. But when the rain passed, silence returned almost as quickly as it had begun. When evening came, the canyon grew even colder. The September sun slipped behind the cliffs, and the park settled into dusk. Rangers closed offices, tourists headed back to hotels in Springdale, and headlights flickered along the highway outside the park. But 7 hikers never returned. Friends and family expected them back by late afternoon. Keyhole Canyon is short, half a mile, a couple of hours at most. By dinner time, loved ones began to wonder. Calls were made, messages went unanswered. Phones rang in empty pockets at the bottom of a canyon filled with mud and water. At the park, no alarm was raised immediately. Zion is vast, and people often run late on hikes. Rangers typically wait until a hiker is reported overdue before initiating a search. For the group in Keyhole, the delay meant that the critical hours of daylight slipped away unnoticed. Night fell across Zion. The cliffs turned black silhouettes against the sky, and the canyons disappeared into shadow. Inside Keyhole, water still surged through the chambers. The canyon held its grim secret. At dawn on Tuesday, September 15th, 2015, Zion National Park stirred awake. The red cliffs glowed under the first light, the Virgin River shimmered, and tourists once again filled the visitor center. To most, it was the start of another beautiful day. But for park rangers, it was the beginning of a desperate mission. Reports of a missing group of 7 had come in. They were last known to be entering Keyhole Canyon the day before. They had not returned. The rangers knew the forecast from the previous day. They knew about the thunderstorm that had raged over the Kolo Plateau, and they knew what that meant for anyone caught inside a slot canyon. Even before they set out, a heavy silence hung over the search. The rescue teams moved quickly toward the trailhead. Vehicles pulled up, gear was unloaded, radios checked. Search and rescue veterans strapped on helmets and ropes, their faces set with grim determination. By mid-morning, the first team reached the mouth of Keyhole Canyon. The entrance was quiet, still wet from the storm. From outside, there was no sign of the violence that had swept through less than 24 hours earlier. But once the rescuers entered, the story revealed itself. The walls were slick, streaked with mud. Pools that were normally waist-deep were now filled with brown, debris-laden water. Branches, logs, and stones lay scattered in unnatural places, jammed into cracks high on the walls. Proof of the flood's height and power. The rangers moved carefully, rappelling into chamber after chamber, the smell of wet earth and silence pressing in on them. They called out, their voices echoing into the dark. But no answer came. Then came the first discovery. In a pool where the flood had churned most violently, rescuers spotted a figure, a wetsuit, a helmet, a body pinned against rock by mud and debris. One of the 7 had been found. The canyon grew heavier with every step. The team pressed on, and soon another body appeared. Then another. The flood had scattered them across different chambers, trapping them in places where escape had been impossible. By the end of the day, rescuers had located all 7. Each recovery was slow and methodical, requiring ropes, teamwork, and silence. These were not just numbers on a report. They were sons, daughters, friends. Rangers treated them with reverence, moving carefully through the same slots that had claimed their lives. Outside the canyon, news began to spread. Families were notified. The media soon reported the worst. All 7 hikers in Keyhole Canyon were dead. For the rescuers, the mission left an indelible mark. One ranger later described it as one of the most haunting recoveries of his career. Keyhole was not a long canyon, but that day it felt endless, each corner revealing more evidence of nature's ruthless power. The tragedy in Keyhole Canyon on September 14, 2015, stands as one of the darkest moments in Zion National Park's history. 7 lives full of promise and adventure were ended in the span of minutes. And yet, from their loss, there are lessons that every adventurer, hiker, and traveler can take to heart. The first lesson is simple, but often ignored. Nature does not negotiate. It doesn't bend to human schedules, hopes, or optimism. The Valencia crew had plans. They had gear. They had each other. But the storm didn't care. When the rain fell, the canyon flooded. Nature always has the final word. The second lesson is one of respecting warnings. On that morning, the National Weather Service and park rangers had issued clear alerts. Flood danger was real, and many hikers turned back. The group pressed on. Perhaps they believed the canyon was short enough to finish quickly. But flash floods don't need hours of rain. They need only minutes.
Yeah, we
In
have this
slot
incredible new video
canyons,
that shows
even a storm miles away can send walls of water roaring down.
with fierce
The
rains,
warnings are
hail,
not
and 50
suggestions.
park
They are
floodwaters
lifelines.
closing in on them.
The third lesson is about experience versus expertise. The Valencia crew were experienced hikers, but not experienced canyoneers. They knew mountains, trails, and endurance, but slot canyons require a different kind of knowledge. Reading storm systems, understanding drainage maps, recognizing subtle signs that water is coming. Experience in one realm of the outdoors does not always translate to another. In wilderness, humility can save lives. Keyhole Canyon still draws visitors today. Its walls are just as narrow, its pools just as cold, its silence just as deep. Those who enter may not know the story of September 14th, 2015, but the canyon remembers, and so should we. Because the next time clouds gather over the plateau and the rain begins to fall, the lesson of Keyhole will return, whispered by the water rushing through stone. Never take nature for granted.